Hey guys, Wyvros here, and I'm going to be doing our second Wyvros Mythos. Halloween's coming up, and I think we deserve a Halloween episode. Now, there's probably hundreds of you going, "How dare you think you could give us a Halloween episode? You started this series months ago, and you're only on episode 2." Understand, a lot of things have been happening with me dancing, having our downfall, and me moving back in with my mother, and now me starting school for video game design. I haven't, and not to mention my emotional breakdown, but through all that, I've finally been able to get a chance to do this. I've been wanting to do this one. I actually skipped out on number 2 to do a lot of research the past few days on this one, because number 2 was going to be another fiend from a different game. But with Halloween coming, I wanted to do a character based off of the most feared undead creatures of all RPGs, Liches. Now, the Lich is seen a lot of times throughout Final Fantasy, either as regular encounters or bosses. I'm going to be talking about the bosses because, no offense, Lich, in all of your battles throughout all of Final Fantasy, they're pretty one-dimensional. So they all pretty work hand in hand on this. This is probably going to be a longer episode because we got to get down to the beginning of basically understanding where Lich come from and what its power is. So I actually had this all typed up so I can give it to you guys. So, before we can actually state what a Lich is, we must state the magic it works. The magic a Lich uses is known as necromancy. It is the practice of magic involving communications with the deceased, either by summoning their spirit as an apparition or raising them bodily. Their body, They have this for many purposes, either for the purpose of divination, which is the seeking of spiritual or otherworldly intelligence or guidance, to bring a loved one back from the dead, or to even just use the deceased as weapons. Yeah, all of these are considered all throughout the history of necromancy. Necromancy is also a form of shamanism, which is the spiritual or religious act of which one calls upon the spirits such as ghosts or ancestries. So, going through necromancy and understanding what it is, you have to go through its history. So we're going to start from its roots, the Greco-Roman necromancy. At this time, records of its practice were in ancient Egypt, Babylonia, Greece, and Rome. The oldest literature that I could find that had a literal account of necromancy in it was in Homer's Odyssey. Now, I'm not going to tell you in what part. You're going to have to read the book to figure that one out, because it's a beautiful book and you should read it. Hashtag read that book. Anyways, the rituals of necromancy were quite elaborate, actually, involving magic circles, wands, talismans, and even incantations. The necromancer might surround himself with morbid symbols of death, even often wearing the deceased's clothing and consuming foods that symbolize death and decay. This would include unleavened black bread and unfermented grape juice. Both sound horrible. Some necromancers went even so far to take in the part of mutilation and consumption of the corpses. Ceremonies of this can last for hours, days, even weeks before getting contact. And it was preferred to do it in interment or other melancholy venues, such as graveyards or burial places, because that's where the feeling of death is. It's melancholy, it's sad, so it made a lot of sense to them. Now, necromancers were very picky on who they were bringing back. They preferred to summon the recently departed, based on the fact that they spoke more clearly and they could understand them. The time frame was usually limited to 12 months following the death of the actual person. This is because this is where they wanted them to look most human, I guess. But if this period passed, they would then just evoke the ghostly spirit instead. So basically, in Greek Roman necromancy, it seems like that necromancy was used for rituals of intelligence, healing, spiritual guidance, love. It was very, as I would say, shamanistic, because it wasn't black or bad, and it wasn't white or good. It was in the middle. It was based on what the person wanted. Then came the early and high Middle Ages. Oh my god. Now, I'm going to let you know, this is when necromancy actually took a downfall and was really seen as evil. But this is only because of the medieval practitioners. They believed they had accomplished 3 things with necromancy. Will manipulation is one of them. They believed they could affect the mind and will of another person, animal, or spirit to make them do what they want, or do what they don't want them to do, or say what they want them to say. It was literal control of the mind and spirit of everything. They believe they can inflict illusions involving reanimation of the dead, or conjuring food, entertainment, or transportation. Things that made people want them, or things that they could actually believe they could conjure for themselves. Lastly was knowledge of the physical world. It seems that the Middle and High Ages were actually very greedy and tend to use this practice to find criminals, stolen objects, treasure, money, power. So necromancy at this time was seen as very evil because of the Catholic and Christian movement at this time. Yeah, and necromancy didn't see a good day. Then came the Renaissance. Nothing really happened well in the Renaissance besides the fact that necromancy was practiced behind closed doors because of the Catholic movement. So, I guess it was just like secret society, huh? Then comes the modern age. Now, we don't see a lot of what we believe is necromancy. A lot of what we believe in necromancy we see in today's media, such as books, movies, and video games, even music, or we hear it in music. The act of actually raising the dead and controlling them. What we know is necromancy thanks to the media. But there are still forms of necromancy today. These can be seen in psychics, mediums, shamans, and Ouija boards. Remember, necromancy was a divination. It was the act of bringing a spirit so they could see them and love them, to contact them, either for emotional contact or spiritual healing or knowledge of the unknown. And this is exactly what psychics, mediums, shamans, and Ouija boards are used for. So literally, these technically can be considered forms of necromancy. Now that we know what necromancy is, let's figure out what a lich is. A lich is either a powerful mage or king who uses spells or rituals to bind his intellect and soul, and then thereby, achieving a form of immortality. This normally acted with a ceremony to seal their intellect and either part or all of their intellect and soul into a phylactery, or a physical object, one used to achieve immortality to become a lich. Now understand that what we know as phylacteries is actually just a little Jewish box, if you're actually to look it up. However, liches use the term phylactery because it holds the spirit and the intelligence. But there's actually a lot of things that we don't know, or that we misconcept about phylactery. They could be anything. Yes, anything. They could be nature, objects, or even living creatures. As long as it had a physical form, it was good to go. So you could literally make someone or something a phylactery. Hell, you could turn a mountain into a phylactery. I mean, good luck destroying a mountain, or even better, a volcano into a phylactery. Anything that had a physical form could actually be a phylactery. Also, a lich could have more than one phylactery. Yeah. So it's hard enough that I'm going to hunt this object and destroy it, which normally couldn't be destroyed in conventional means. Had to use magic or curses or hexes to break them or make them vulnerable to conventional means. And they were normally pretty well hidden. So not only do I need to hunt down a phylactery and figure out how I'm going to destroy it, you're going to tell me you can have more than one? Yeah, you can't. To kill the Lich, one must destroy all of the Lich's phylactery. If not, he will revive within about a week's time. So I'm just going to say about a week, because I couldn't find a day, like an actual system, or an actual long time. And the only one I could find in D&D, and I have no idea what 1d10 days is. Basically, think as phylactery as Horcruxes from Harry Potter. That's the best way to think about it. Now, there's a lot of misunderstandings thanks to the media about what a Lich truly is, or what we generalize as a Lich. Understand that not all Liches were evil. Most just achieved immortality so they can gain knowledge. Most of them were wizards and mages who wanted all the knowledge they could. So they stepped into it and achieved that immortality just so they can have more time to gain the knowledge and share it with the world. Not all Liches were skeletons. Some could be skeletons, some really just thin and pale, or you just stay the same with just pale tone. Actually, not all Liches were skeletons. We see them as skeletons or very skinny, deformed people. In reality, Liches changed physically when they age. The older they are, that's when they become skeletons. And even then, from what I've read and researched, they can convert their physical body to go back to just being the same with just pale-toned skin. No Lich was mindless or mad. You probably play a lot of RPGs that don't know a lot about Liches, or just was really fast into making the game and made the Lich power hungry or crazy. In reality, no. They retain their intelligence, their memories, their feelings, and their thought processes they had before the transformation. They were basically like revenants, except they lived forever. They could literally live forever and had no reason to be on Earth. So it could be any reason at all, and they would stay. Unlike a revenant, which did it for revenge and then went back to sleep, Liches, they don't have to go back to being dead. And that's what makes a Lich very powerful and scary. Now, from what I've read, they do not receive their powers from the transformation. But in reality, from all the studying of the magic and lore that they did over the hundreds of years of being a Lich. So, whether the fact or not that a mage or a king became a Lich, they would immediately be able to raise the dead. Now understand, this is why in a lot of video games, necromancy is connected well with Lichdom, because a Lich can raise and control the dead. And with necromancy, they were able to raise and bind the dead, so the dead couldn't hurt them during the time of divination. So it made a lot more sense for RPGs to do this. And that's why, in a lot of ways, you see necromancy and then lichdom. Out of all of my research, before you guys go yelling at me, Wyvern, I thought you were only going to do mythology or cryptozoology on here. You're just telling me everything about, like, video games. And, black magic. I mean, yeah, that's considered supernatural, but where's the mythology? Relax, guys. I was actually doing a lot of research. I mean, a lot. And I think I found a creature that probably is not exactly a lich, but hits a lich to a T. And that is known as Kachki. He was an evil sorcerer, king, or mage of Slavic mythology. Normally they were switched up between the three, whose death was hidden in several nested magical animals and objects. Sounds very reminiscent, doesn't it? Magical objects, phylactery, both high death, and in a form he became immortal, just like a lich. So apparently, Kachki's death was found. See, on the ocean, there is an island, and on that island of oak stands... Okay, so on that island there's oak, and standing under an oak is a chest. Buried in the chest is a hare, a rabbit, and in that hare, a duck, and in this duck, an egg, and within that egg was his death. So that egg was his phylactery, or whatever the hell was in the egg, was his phylactery. He's often seen acting as a captor of a bride of the protagonist or causing some sort of trouble, just like liches of today's day do. Or as we see it. So Lich mythology versus Lich Final Fantasy. What are we looking at? As we all know, this is the key, to put the two together and then compare them. In reality, I know this is unfair because we don't get to know a lot about the Lich in the Final Fantasy series, but I would have to give him a 4 out of 5. And in reality, not knowing a lot about him is exactly what a Lich is all about. He was a mage who traded his immortality to gain knowledge or wisdom or power or whatever. And with over time, he decayed. He became a monster. So he had to hide and seclude himself. So nobody really knew a lot about them. And that exactly matches the Lich of Final Fantasy. We're not given a backstory. He just gives us a name and what he does, and he attacks us. He commands the earth, which makes a lot of sense for a Lich. If a Lich is able to raise the dead, then wouldn't it make any sense that they can rot the ground to feed the dead? Since technically the dead rise from the ground. Poison. Of course you're going to have poison because it's a rotting body that releases nasty gases. The ability to command death and drain life. If a necromancer can raise the dead, why can't he command the dead? And just from the little information we got from the Lich, really matches liches that we have in mythology and lore and media. You don't know a lot about them or why they do what they do. All you know is that there's a Lich and he hides himself and he's escaped death. And that's all we know about the Lich in Final Fantasy. But what really doesn't give him the 5 out of 5 is the fact is Liches can escape death. The Lich in Final Fantasy doesn't escape death. If the Lich in Final Fantasy was truly a powerful Lich, which he had to be for being aged, he would have already made phylactery and hidden them. We were never given a quest where we had to find something and destroy it. So, even just being a basic Lich, like let's say you just turned a Lich, you decided you wanted to be a Lich, and you did the ritual today, you'd still had to make your phylactery. which means you would still have been immortal until they destroyed that one phylactery. We didn't destroy anything. We fed a ruby to a monster, killed a vampire, grabbed a staff, and warped to the top and beat him up. Unless the ruby and the vampire were his phylactery, which we don't get a statement, so we can't even necessarily believe that, he's not truly a Lich. If anything, he would be an overpowered revenant. And that is why I believe the Lich from Final Fantasy gets a 4 out of 5 in my book. So for now, guys, this is Wyvros Mythos, and it's the Wyvros signing out. Later, guys.